Hello.
And good to see you. And I've heard so many wonderful things about you. So it's so very nice to be able to do this.
Thank you so much, Rishabh.
And before I begin, let me tell all the viewers. She has promised me that if it goes off well, she's going to be fighting 2 cases for us for free.
Definitely. More than happy, and everything goes along with the spirit for sure.
You know, but a lady who needs little introduction. You know, you've essentially served as additional Solicitor General, practiced in the highest courts, and also represented the government on occasions. And now you've donned the hat of an author. And today you are here in the capacity of an author. Pinky ma'am, it's a pleasure to be able to do this. Welcome to India's International Movement to Unite Nations, the author series.
Thank you so much, Rishabh. Indeed, I haven't really done this particular kind of, let's say, online platform earlier. So it indeed delights me that this should be one of the occasions. And as you rightly said, I started out as a lawyer principally and continue as a lawyer. So this was a kind of diversion, call it, digression, call it, improvement, call it, but indeed a different kind of arena into which I did enter. And it became a huge event for us, and we'll talk about it. In particular, I'll tell you why. Actually, see, as a lawyer, we write in very staid, conservative, archaic Latin. We want to make it more complicated. So the initial effort at writing the book was very much as a lawyer and very boring, to be honest. So it took a while to get over that rigidity. You wanted to get more flexibility. So the whole effort into transgressing from being a lawyer's textbook to a book which was a ready reader for laymen and across civil society, and something obviously which would interest, it took a bit of going, and it took a lot of transformation of self and a style. But at the end of the day, it actually reads decently well.
No, it does. It does. It makes for a very interesting read, and I'm very excited to discuss this book. But I must also tell you that young people look at the judiciary, and we impact a few millions of young people every year. When we talk to them, I tell you that the concern amongst young people is growing when it comes to the judiciary, whether they're giving the actual statement basis the truth, or is there just a trial of the truth, and then essentially something else comes out per se. But rather than delving onto that in immediate sense, let me ask you questions basis your book and then touch upon that topic as well. So I'm just giving that forewarning that I'm going to ask you those types of questions that young people have been asking me, saying, Rishabh, you're getting judges. We had the Chief Justice on some time ago, and we were talking to him. I was not asking the questions. But the students asked a lot of hard-hitting questions. So I'm just going to pre-warn you that some of the questions I'm asking you are the ones from students. One of the things that you mentioned in your book is about gender bias, and you mentioned that that there is a lot of gender bias when it comes to how Indian society perceives women, and this is very clear whether it be the Renuka Shinde case or whether it be the Seema Gavit case, or now very recently the Zomato delivery. Do you think that it's high time that modern India starts believing that crime has no gender?
I think we still labor under our ancient notions, all said and done. So, you have this entire panorama of people believing that women are very compassionate, women are gentle, women are caring, and women can't really do any criminal activities of kind. So the mindset doesn't change. Please understand, we were talking about a couple of these issues even recently, even things like benevolent sexism, where you actually protect women in the name of protection. Actually, that's another matter, what actually happens. But the entire concept of women has been, and it constantly generated. The recent case also, the Supreme Court recently came out in a judgment in respect of the sexual assault and the Rakhi tying incident, which led to a new judgment. And even there, the whole concept is what is an ideal woman. Of course, I'm not talking about only ideal women, but I'm saying the whole concept of a woman and the concept of ideal is something that goes along with gender. It's a gender kind of specific statement. I'm not so sure there's an ideal man kind of concept roaming around the institutions. So coming back to the ideal woman concept or the woman concept, yes, there is still an unbelieving situation, and it is very difficult for people to actually perceive that women can be hard-hitting, women can be cold-blooded, women can be murderers. So, as a matter of fact, Rishabh, between you and me, this chapter incited and invoked some of the maximum passions from people, to be honest. So, it is the women who kill. It is quite a transgression from all other forms of thought. The general perception, yes, is that it is the male accused who will perpetrate the crime, and particularly you're talking about the harder crimes. You're not talking about the softer crimes. You're not talking about theft. You're not talking about something like minor attack or the other. Also, even attack. Physical attack is again another issue. People don't perceive women as being able to attack physically. So the concept of murder by women, mentioned the matter recently, and that has shown again the two different versions that came out, and how it is being taken up by cross FIRs between both, and how people believe that the woman may not have been able to do that. So these perceptions run across the narrative, not only of India, incidentally, it also runs across the globe. But of course, in India, even more so, because you have the notions of woman as a devi and a woman as a goddess, and so on, and goes on further from there.
No, and Hinduism is a culture, I mean, without getting into religion, but the only thing is that the Hindu culture is such that, that projects women as the Devi, like you rightly said. Now, these kind of narratives that are, these narratives that are played, some because of mythology, some because of religion, and some because of, and the others because of media. And because it was a dangerous question, I think the phone just fell saying that Rishabh, she's from the BJP, don't forget. But I'm going to ask you that there's too much of, ma'am, there's been too much of spread of this narrative that's going on in terms of whether it be the right or whether it be the left, and whether it be a pro-BJP or anti-BJP, national or anti-national bucks and so on and so forth. This entire narrative that's been playing, and then they have these media trials. So basically, if you say something that is slightly also, which is not supporting the government or is against the government, then I've seen many cases where anchors ostracize, they don't let people speak, and they tend to speak over the person that they've called in. So it's basically like you're giving an answer, but I'm interrupting you, and then I'm trying to prove my point. These media narratives, these media trials are also adversely impacting young India when they look at a report in Sweden. I'm not saying that we should look at Western yardsticks, but when they look at a report in Sweden, connect that with a popular anchor at 9 p.m. who shouts his lungs out and always knows what the nation wants to know. Then it's becoming difficult in order to say that we yet live in a democratic society. Do you really think that we yet continue to live in a democratic society? And do you think that these media trials are not painting our democracy in a very different way?
Rishabh, there are kind of three issues that come up with your statement. Firstly, the belief that media trials itself is a subject of some concern, and it has been in the judicial field as much as in civil society. Should media be allowed to decide what is happening and actually portray it so that people are convinced? Or to what extent, for example, in let's say Kasab's trial, something came out in the media, and whether it influenced the judges, should it be able to influence? Should it not be able to influence? Should it come at a pre-trial stage, or should it come while the trial is going on? But coming back to what media trial has done as a general thing, and I'll come to your question also. But as far as media trial is concerned, believe me, we have seen times much prior to the media being active in the social media, whether you talk the social media, the electronic media. So everybody actually delving in. And today, as you rightly said, all of you, the youth, have knowledge about what is happening inside the courts. And believe me, when you look at some of these platforms, you find that there is actually line-to-line reporting of arguments, of even what the observations are of the judges. So everybody knows what's going on, which is a very good thing by itself. Secondly, as far as media trial is concerned, you have seen, I have covered some part in the book also. It has actually resulted in a positive note for the entire country and for the vindication of various victims' rights, which were otherwise being sidestepped and may have gone that path. So media as a watchdog has been a very, very important issue that has been coming up. And I think it is something that we cannot in any manner ignore. In any case, open access to justice, knowledge, what is happening, that is part of what the media does. And people get the knowledge so that, again, public cynosure becomes a cynosure of public. eyes. Again, there is some kind of delving into a positive path. But coming to the issues of anchors over speaking or not allowing people to speak, I'll tell you an incident that happened years back. I was in one of such anchors programs, and somebody came back and said, "Oh, you were allowed to speak." Now, believe me, this happened about almost 5 years back. This business of over speaking and all is something that has been happening on the media for a while. So I don't think you can really drag this in as a narrative. As far as the government is concerned, it is something that the media seems to believe in. And incidentally, while we talk, it seems that the civil society also does appreciate it. Of course, there are times that the civil society changes its focus and decides that it is not acceptable. But there are varying versions to it, and it's not a rigid stand that has been taken by even civil societies. I have heard anchors such as this being praised galore. I have heard anchors such as this sometimes not being praised or criticized for this over speaking. But I think it's really like a roulette kind of situation where there's always a 00 kind of thing or some button under the table. So this phasing out of people speaking is not across A or B or C channels. It is across general board. As a matter of course, as you know, as spokesperson for the party, there were times when I was asked to be some friends said I should be more aggressive, and I said, if I have to make a statement and it's credible statement, it will stand for itself. I don't have to shout it out, or I don't have to shout somebody else down. So this whole blitz that's coming around of over speaking is something that I think we all need to watch out for. And it doesn't make us for any higher credibility whatsoever. But as far as you want the anchors to pipe down, I guess your shows will indicate to them what you people think. And believe me, media also responds as much as any other institution does to generally what civil society appreciates. Appreciation is a very important part, not only TRP. It's the same thing in any case, in one way or the other. So when you have that kind of focus from people like you and the youth saying, we don't appreciate this, we want something in a different fashion, it'll come.
Ma'am, it's all well and good to say it. It's all well and good to say it here, but when it comes to reality, and I've seen so many of the students from IMON actually join, your party. Some are elected members of governments, whether it be from the Vidhan Sabha all the way to the Parliament, and I must also tell you this, and we're doing this on Instagram live in front of all of these people. But I must tell you this, that when it comes to over speaking and things like that, and this is why I'm asking you this particular question, is that I've rarely seen a Karan Thapar. He's asked a lot of questions which are very hard hitting, but I've rarely seen a Karan Thapar ask, over speak and not let the other person finish speaking. He always finishes, allows the other person to speak. Now, when you look at anchors such as Karan Thapar, he's been sidelined to the wire. He's been pushed across because he does not concur with a particular standpoint of what is the current narrative or so-called popular opinion of our country. Now, is this also right? The ostracization of a certain set of media and just generally people and society at large who basically disagree with what the current establishment stands for. And the reason I'm asking you this, I think we've lost. We're going to try to. Oh, we've lost my connection. Either one of the two. Guys, can you hear me?
Frozen. So give me a second. You got frozen. I'm so sorry. So can I just go back to my settings and just check for a moment if the Wi-Fi is there? Just give me a second.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, guys. Am I audible to all of you? Perfect. Thank you, Anushka. All right, we've lost her, but we're going to try to add her. I hope that those were not too many strong questions one after the other. But let me quickly try to add her. She's Okay. Ma'am, if you can hear me, I'd request you to just write something in the chat section so it would be easy in order to get you back on. Okay. So I think it's important to ask these questions. Yeah, I think it's very important to ask these questions on your behest, because I think at the end of the day, I know that there are many people who feel ostracized and who feel, that they can't speak up. And essentially, as a lawyer and as somebody who is, oh here she is, as a lawyer and as somebody who is as erudite as she is, I thought it best to ask her. Let me. There we have. Yes, ma'am.
Rishabh, I'm very worried. This losing of the Wi-Fi incidentally it caught the other connection, and this going off seems to be too convenient, right? Now, I don't want that to be ever a feeling. There's one thing which I've learned never to do, and that is run away from anything. So when you do have to go for a response, and believe me, it's important. But I don't really, this whole narrative of which editor, which anchor is going from one particular program to another program, and how does the government enter into that kind of narrative, I really fail to understand. The liking or not liking of any anchor is something which is perfectly a situation which I understand across surface, and I understand responses by people. And as I said, I've seen varying responses. I'll tell you, for example, there was a time when I traveled through the length and breadth of India, and I'm talking about like 5, 6, 7 years back, and I'll name the anchor since we're talking about. Arnab's program was being displayed everywhere, and everybody was rooting for him. So now I'm also unable to understand to some extent why there's a change. However, if civil society so expresses, this is the freedom that there. There are different types of anchors, different type of expressions. It's up to you. So it's up to you to who you watch and who you don't want to watch. As somebody said, even, Justice Chandrachud was talking about Arna's program and said, it is your choice to watch or not watch. You don't have to say that he can't be there. Or some other anchor has to be in this position or the other position. This is the freedom of democracy, that you are having people in different positions and expressing their views across surfaces. It's not that the views are not there. Just because Karan Thapar has gone from one medium to another medium doesn't mean that he doesn't have any freedom of choice of expression whatsoever. So I think we have to take it at, yeah. So that is where we have to take it, that you do have the freedom to express, maybe in a different forum, but nobody's got a fundamental right to be across one media channel or the other.
No, ma'am, I didn't mean that necessarily. What I meant is there is also a large section that has been ostracized for saying things that are against the establishment. And you said, ma'am, it's the freedom of speech, it's the freedom of choice, democracy, Article 19.1. But then you utilize 19.1 with 19.2, and sometimes it feels that it is being read as per convenience. This is what the general perception sometimes is. And I say this not talking to students of JNU or talking to students of St. Xavier's, but I'm saying this talking to a large variety of students from across. And ma'am, in that, let me say this, that I'm not saying that everybody does not like what the government is doing, like the new IT guidelines on social media and OTT. Now, when it comes to things such as these, all that I'm trying to say is, ma'am, do you accept that there is a fear of being chased if, say, for example, somebody says something that is against the government? Do you think that this fear is justified, or do you think the government is accepting and willing when it comes to criticism?
Your question of whether people are afraid, I mean, I can't see it across surface. I do see some issues coming up from time to time, but most of them are subject specific and come up on those occasions. But I don't see how we are talking about any kind of suppression whatsoever. You are having the media with its trial issue or whatever it might be. You are having matters in courts across almost every court, not only the Supreme Court. You're having matters across the high courts in every possible expression, whether it is you're talking about COVID, or you're talking about the lockdown, or you're talking about any other feature. Each of these features has been discussed. At times there has been either, if not praise, if not criticism, at least a question of what is happening. Questions are being asked. To what extent anybody may want. See, you must understand, we have a very large youth. And I think we have a very vibrant youth. So the questions that are being asked today are huge. They really magnify themselves. And I don't particularly relish one thing. I do think there can't be one manner of thinking for sure.
Of
So
course.
it can't be that if I'm questioned, and 19.2, let's come to 19.2 for a minute. Article 19.2 of the Constitution is something that we've had since the Constitution has been with us over 70 odd years. We are the Republic at 70 at this point of time. These laws, which include sedition or any other laws, are basically saved under the Indian Penal Code. They've been considered so. So this is part and parcel of our structuring as it is happening. So for anybody to say, there is this constitutional provisions, but it is being utilized. Well, it is being utilized from time to time. You didn't have the Balakot attacks happening in earlier regimes. It's happened now. You didn't have Kashmir being becoming a part of the territory of India. Well, it was the Article 370 was there. So nobody used it. We did. So, if you go across narratives, now if you have a decisive step which is being taken by the government from time to time, when you're talking about terrorism, for example, you're having terrorism is such a major issue which has been confronting not only India but across surface. India, of course, has had its own piecemeals earlier. So if you say you're now having terrorist laws which are very stringent, which are very penal in nature, you put people behind bars, you don't give them facility of bail, you can detain them for 60 odd days under the UAPA, you can, and that is across board. So, as I said, there could be some variations and there could be some questions, but to say that there is only one-way traffic, I'm afraid is something which is not acceptable to me.
Fair. No, I'm not saying there's one-way traffic. I'm saying that I must concede that after 34 years, you came up with a new education policy. Vaccine diplomacy is something the whole world is praising India, not just the whole world, but people in India across political fraternities also appreciate it. All that I'm trying to say, ma'am, is that, and I want to ask you this and take this from freedom of speech into another aspect, is when your party, which is the BJP, and because you are also a part of the BJP, apart from being an author and a lawyer, I must ask you this question, and you've written it in your book as well. Sometimes there are criminals who represent, and not just in the BJP, but across party lines, criminals who are accused of murder essentially represent the party in parliament. Now, with an educated electorate across the country, and more young people now active in politics, or at least sensitized to what is happening across the country, don't you think it's high time that we put a qualification criterion when it comes to things like entering parliament, or for that matter, giving a ticket to a criminal or somebody who's accused of something as heinous as murder?
I'll come to two of these subjects. This has been debated very widely in this country. So it is, for a moment, not only the criminal element, I'll come to that in a moment, but in terms of literacy, the desire to impose literacy as a criteria for people who stood for parliament or for the state assemblies, that is a question which came up earlier, and it was finally decided by the Supreme Court in terms, and I must admire it because it has to be so, that you cannot in this country of now 1.38 billion to have imposition of a literacy criteria, for example, though again, as you said, you have a very vibrant youth and a very educated youth, so why not? But you can't, because you have people across board, so you have literates and you have people who are not as literate, at least in the traditional fields or the formal education, so to say. They may be better than the literates are from whether IIMs or IITs or whatever it might be, but they are not in the formal education. They don't have a degree in hand. So that's one part of it. Coming to the criminal part of it. Now, I do understand and I actually appreciate the fact that we are disconcerted, all of us are disconcerted by this entire method of having representation, because we are reliant upon our representatives in parliament to express what we want. So the question of whether you can have a criminal there on board or not. But again, there has been a tremendous amount of working on it. So if you have been convicted of a charge, then there is disqualification. So you have set into place the disqualifications, which include when you have been involved in a major crime. You have had people like Lalu and others being kept out of parliament on this ground. So it is not as if the representation in that sense is there. But the difficult or the ambiguous area or the gray area is, what if you're charged? Now the question is, you have only been charged, you are not convicted, the trial is not concluded, you may be guilty, you may be innocent. Now that is where the question comes in. Can you, on the basis of a complaint oblique FIR, any proceedings launched against you which are at the stage of pre-trial, disqualify a person from standing in the House of Parliament and representing the people? That is a very dicey question, considering the fact that you do have the entire basis of innocence until proved guilty. So you do have to stand with that. And that is the reason the entire legislation or the law was made on this basis. Earlier, we didn't even have disqualification for conviction. but we put it into the parliament, into the legislation for this reason. So you do have that position where your, let's say your, as in your sections or your cross sections, fears or apprehensions have been taken to task. So now, for example, as you might know, I don't know, you're very young, of course, but this process of disclosure of people's antecedents, including any criminal trials, pending criminal trials, came into being about 10 years back. I still remember when the forms were brought in with the change of law and the change of procedure. So people, I'll tell you what the media has to do. They would never look at any other criteria in the form. The only thing they would come to, kitne criminal cases and kitne assets hai. Two things were all that the media wanted to know, and that's what they would flash. So, for example, if somebody had a car which was, worth talking about, or somebody had a murder case which was talked about. So the idea again was, if the people know what their representatives have in store with them, then it is for the people also to select people in that category. So that was one criteria for disclosure. The disqualification came as a matter of principle because of such movements to say we don't want criminals to represent us in parliament. So that is something that has been impending and has been implemented, rather, not impending, on the disqualification. It is only the pre-trial issues, because of the manner in which law proceeds and the assumptions that we have, that you can't really disqualify. I'll tell you why again. You have so many false cases registered. So again, if you have a person who is wanted to be discredited or thrown out, the simplest thing would be to file a case against that person. And if that gets translated into a trial process of sorts before the concerned courts, and you say, I'm sorry, this person is not competent to represent us. So we do not have the wherewithal at this point of time, for sure, to be able to do this. I wonder whether we will ever have, because the principles are innocence till proved guilty. So what do you do with that? The people don't decide who's a criminal and who's not a criminal.
No, fair. People don't, and media also shouldn't, in a way. But then again, it's only when media puts a lot of pressure that sometimes some cases come to light. But not that, ma'am. What I'm also wanting to touch upon is the cases such as Fulan Devi, the Bandit Queen. Now, she spent about 11 years in prison. When she came out of prison after being convicted, after serving her time, she was handed a ticket by a popular political party, and then she contested, and she was in the Lok Sabha, and she was a member of parliament, and she actually she represented the people, so called, who she actually terrorized at one point in time. Do you really think that after being convicted, after serving your time, is it fair for such a human being, when they have been given, when the nature of the crime is such that political parties actually give tickets? Because I only say this because today in the House you have about 6% MPs who are below 35. You've got 12% who are below 42 or 43, and at the end of the day, ma'am, you've got a parliament that is a parliament at 54, 55, and Rajya Sabha at 62. And you've got the youngest minister at 43. And when you look at the educational qualifications, I'm not saying education qualification should be a metric, but then again, you've got reservation in every form. You've got SC/ST reservation, you've got OBC reservation, you've got sports quota, cultural quota. I remember when I was in college a decade ago, ma'am, there were only 7% seats that were available for a general quota. With being the second highest in university from in grade 12, I could barely get into my undergraduate course. So
No, you're right. I have seen that. I've seen that desire for reverse discrimination, and really, speaking, the majority, so to say, having a position of inferiority, so to say, within the campuses and institutions, is something that is of immense concern, by all means.
But ma'am, but that's what I'm saying, ma'am. When it comes to giving, see, you're not giving the educated electorate, you're not giving the educated urban young people, or not just educated urban, but educated people across. You're not giving them tickets. Let's be honest, the people who are in parliament who are below the age of 35, the 6%, if you were to take out the statistics of how many of them don't come from political lineage, you'll be able to easily tell that it's very good, and it's good on stage. It's good on public platforms and holding somebody's hand up and saying, "Youth is the future. You walk 2 steps and we'll walk 5." But where is that? Where is that change coming about? And you're yet giving tickets to people who are convicted. people who are responsible for demolition of the Babri Masjid are actually yet getting tickets, ma'am. And this is across party lines. I'm
Rishabh,
not saying this to the BJP.
I must say, I see your future as a parliamentarian very soon for sure. So, having said this, I think we are mixing up two subjects. See, what you're talking about is A, how criminals should not be there in parliament and it should be given to the better section of society, so to say. So, the criminal part
Correct.
of it, I have explained. What
Right.
is possible has been done and nothing further can be done. And the very important part of disclosure, I think you have to understand that even when parties give tickets to pre-trial people, obviously it would not be post-trial at this point of time. It is for the people to ultimately elect them or not elect them. And that right that anybody has as a civil society, I think is something that is so democratic and should be acknowledged. As if we want to elect people knowingly that people are in a certain capacity and we don't appreciate what they do, then I'm afraid by electing them, we have also something to be asked for ourselves rather than ask the system to deliver unto all of us what should be there. So that's one part. But on Pulan Devi, I must tell you, firstly, Pulan Devi, the charges were withdrawn against her before she came into parliament. And it is in that position she had served some time. And honestly speaking, please don't talk about her position because I think she was one real icon as far as life is concerned. And having done whatever she did, I don't know how to really say this as a lawyer. Maybe I shouldn't say such things. But the vindication, I remember when I went for a Friday night for the night show for Bandit Queen prior to its being edited. And I remember seeing the situation there, and that bicycle still stands in my memory and a very vivid memory. So the fact that she could come out of the throes of that ravishing and actually come around, she was trying to improve the lot of people. So I won't enter into any more academic discussion on that otherwise. But Bandit Queen and Pulan Devi, incidentally, by the way, she lived across my house somewhere at one point before she got assassinated, and this happened to her. But she actually stood for the right. She did not stand for the wrong. She didn't go and murder anybody for petty money or to try and get something out of them or something that was not her right. It was a vindication. I'm not justifying it. Don't quote me anywhere else. But across this surface, let me just say what I feel. For her, anything. I'm not treating Savita and others, Gavit, in the other same light. They are different kind of people. They did it for monetary gains and other gains. And incidentally, that's what, when we talk about women and men, by the way, the motivations for women and men are quite different in terms of crime. And the primary one, which it is considered as far as women are concerned, would appear to be economic motive by and large. But for Pulan Devi, it was not economic motive. It was really the suffering that she had gone through at the hand and as, in fact, marginalized section of society in all ways, not only in terms of gender, also in terms of caste. And the fact that she came out of the throes of that. No bandit is ever a great man, but most bandits have come out of a situation where they've been terrorized or victimized in one manner or the other. And that's the way I would take it for Pulan Devi.
And you take. I really appreciate your answer, and it's very candid. And this is not Rajdeep show or Arnab's show, and this is not national television. It's only young people and young people asking questions. So this is just going to be restricted to this platform. And therefore, I really appreciate that candidness. But ma'am, in my regard, I prefer being Abhineta, not Neta. But if I had a choice, so but I must.
You have the qualifications. You have the qualifications for both. You have the voice and you have the face.
No, I yet need to build a muscle, but both literally and otherwise. But coming to something which you write in your book about also, and this is in case of Ajmal Kasab, the case that actually shook the government. They spent about 60 crore of taxpayer money on a case that was almost an open and shut case. Now. Is this justified in any sense when that 60 crore could actually have been spent on so many better things? That we spend the taxpayer money in giving justice to the one that not thousands but millions would come and testify saying this was a man who was responsible for what happened in Mumbai. Do you think it was right with what happened?
If I would put my answer like this, if it was not 60 crores, I said even if it was 600 crores. We would have done that and we should have done that. The point is not where else we could have spent the money. The point is when there is a war, let's say, and crores of monies are spent, somebody would say that what's the point of spending it on a war or destroying somebody else? We are doing this not for demonstration. We are not doing this on behalf of the government to demonstrate any feature, but to express the fact that we have the rule of law in this country, and the rule of law has been commended by all. So you cannot have, whether it's a terrorist, whether it's a murderer, whether it's a dacoit, whether it's a bandit queen, you have to have the system of law come into operation and always protect and give a person a right. How do you know? You can't decide across television simply because Ajmal Kasab and the attack on Taj came across on television. I remember seeing it. Doesn't mean that you decided that it's Ajmal Kasab and therefore it is only him is guilty. It has to be through the process of trial. And that is what we commend ourselves for. So while in democracy we talk about 19.1 and 19.2, this is all part of 19.1 and 19.2, as much of Article 21 and right of life. Everybody, even when they are going to be hanged, has a right to be cured. For example, if he's having a heart attack, you can't give him this. He's a murderer. He should be allowed to die like that. You will first save him. That is the process that every civil society goes on. Otherwise, we'd come back to yesteryears in Stone Age and say somebody's done a crime, stone, crush his hands, do whatever that takes. That is not the way a civil society runs or a democratic society runs.
Fair. That is not the way civil society runs, and I respect what you mentioned about, it should go through the due process of law. But ma'am, the bigger question is, and I trust the law of the land. I trust the fact that there is justice being meted out to young people, young and old, and in different cases. But ma'am, when we see, and it's not a first, when we see judges, as much as even going up to the Chief Justice of India, post-retirement, accepting positions in government and serving in government, don't you think that will erode confidence? And I say this across the board, not just the judiciary, but when I look at the bureaucracy, you have a foreign secretary becoming foreign minister, and I believe me, I have utmost regard for Honorable Minister S. Jaishankar, but let me ask you this: that doesn't this show that there is no longer independence between the four pillars of democracy, or do you think that there was never in the first place any distinction between the four pillars of democracy, and it's just that now we've come to know that there is all four of them are interrelated and connected in a way?
I cannot but agree with you that there must be a disconnect. There has to be a disconnect in order to be a fair system. So really speaking, all these issues that you're bringing up are something that do raise concerns, and it is something that we need to look at very closely, because whenever you have a position, firstly, my broad belief, you have an assignment, you continue with that assignment, particularly of course it's with the government or part of the constitutional framework. Once that assignment is concluded, things should stop there. Not only for independence, even as a matter of principle, because you cannot have an ongoing situation. And then, of course, you have the question of conflict or any kind of benefit which is raised, even if it is not existent. Even then, it is raised. So the question is, you have to have the Nero's principles, that you can't even have something which looks imperfect. This is something that I think we need to look at very closely to see in all frameworks. So, for example, from my side, would always say that as far as judges are concerned, increase the ages, make it more, make it another 3 years, give whatever benefits you want to give there, and possibly after that point of time, you call it a closure, because right now the age is very young. It is something that at least in today's society possibly can't be accepted, because you can't really stop working at the age of 65. You youth are different, but at the same time 65 is not exactly that old in today's time. So there are these considerations that should come up. So we need to take care of this surface at this point of time, so that we can't have people wondering as to what is the reason things have happened or positions have been given.
Understood. And like you said, and this is going to be followed by my last question. But what you said very rightly, where you said that increase the retirement age if need be, let people work, work a little more. But then again, ma'am, the irony in the situation, there was a Margdarshak Mandal that was made because there were people who were above the age of so and so, and then they were put across and not given not given active positions of governance or power when it came to the ruling establishment in 2014 and now in 2019. But I must commend you for taking all these questions very candidly and answering them very honestly. And I was only playing the devil's advocate, not as well as the one who actually does it. But probably in a more fair, transparent manner. And because it's not devil's advocate and it's not the nation wants to know, I must end with asking you a few set of questions, which are very light-hearted. It's just one question. What is the first thought that comes to your mind? And it's borrowed from a very popular Bollywood show.
Mhm.
What's the first thought that comes to your mind, or the first word that comes to your mind when I say the following words? When I say India, man, what's the first thought that comes to your mind?
A chord in my heart.
Very well said. When I say lawyer, what's the first thought that comes to mind?
Run the world.
And and quite literally, they run the world. The judicial system.
The last bastion.
A lighter one. When I say food, what's the first thought that comes to your mind, man?
Food security, actually.
Okay. When I say the Bharatiya Janata Party, when the BJP.
Decisive, aggressive, nation building.
Decisive. And when I say Nirbhaya.
Torture, agony, trauma.
And when I say the catchphrase Tariq pe Tariq.
Tariq pe Tariq is something that I think goes down the Bollywood way. I don't know of a single word there, but it's actually dismaying. It is something which pulls you down so badly at times because you do want to see the end of it. So I'm afraid I don't have a one-word answer for Tariq pe Tariq. It's such a bad phrase, but I have seen it across surface, and it's something that we really need to work on. In a way, COVID times have given us a bit of impetus. The online and the virtual platforms have given some speed, but it's given lack of access. So there is this entire debate that is ongoing. I am not able to give you a single word for it.
You're not even. But when when I say the Indian National Congress, what's the first thought that comes to your mind?
The first nationalist party.
The first nationalist party. I don't know how many of them would like to call themselves that, and how many of them would like to draw the line between nationalist and patriotic. But well said. And let me come to the most important one. When I say youth, what's the first thought that comes to your mind?
Energetic, vibrant.
Energetic and vibrant. And the last one, when I say trials of truth, what's the thought that comes to your mind?
A book decently written.
And that's a great note to end on. But I'd like to add, it's not just a decent book. I think it's a phenomenal book, and something that a book that young people must read. They must read it not just because they would be interested in the judicial systems and workings of our country when it comes to the judiciary, but I think it gives you it gives a quite a nuanced perspective about so many things that we hear and see in day-to-day so-called media narratives. So I think it's a book that's a must read for young people, and I must thank you for doing this, because you're doing this on Instagram, and B, you're doing this for young people. So it's a refreshing thing to see a lawyer of this pedigree remove time for young people, and that also on a Sunday. So thank you very much, ma'am, for doing this and for taking our time. Thank you.
Thank you for energizing me. Thank you, Rishabh. Look forward to your future careers, either as a politician and parliamentarian or as a superhero in Bollywood. Take care.
Oh, I wish it's I wish it's the latter more than the former. Then again, thank you very much for your blessings and wishes. Thank you. Bye bye.
All the best. Bye.